Should hybrid athletes always do their strength training first before their endurance training? Or are there times we can do your endurance training first if you're doing double session days? Stick around to find out more. If you look into the research literature, you'll find a lot around training sequence. The idea behind should you do strength first or should you do endurance training first if you're a hybrid athlete. Now, for example, this might be someone who's doing the double sessions but training relatively close. So they're either doing their strength training first, followed by their endurance training, or they might be separating them, having the strength training first, wait around 6 hours, then they do the endurance training. In terms of session order, the research is really supportive of doing strength training first. And that makes a lot of sense because if you think about it, you need to do the exercises which require high forces, which use fast twitch motor units and involve complex skills, say like you're a hybrid athlete that wants to do weightlifting and half marathon running. It makes sense to do those weightlifting skills first because they require those high forces, that high force of development, which involves muscle fibers which get very easily fatigued. However, there are times when you might think, actually, maybe we need to go against this recommendation. Maybe there are times when we might structure endurance training first before our strength training. Reason number one, it's when your endurance training is lacking in comparison to your strength work. Let's use this athlete as an example. You've got someone that comes from a powerlifting background but now wants to become a hybrid athlete, and they're going to do powerlifting still, but they also want to run half marathons. Now, clearly this person has a training history in strength, so they're probably very good at strength training, but probably won't be as good as endurance training. So if we want to try and bring that endurance training up to the same level, we're going to have to start prioritizing endurance training. This isn't to say that every time you're doing strength and endurance on the same day that you then put endurance first. However, there are going to be sessions which really involve or are going to be very fatiguing to the system. For example, some high intensity running intervals. That's going to really fatigue the body. We need to make sure that we're very fresh going into those sessions to make sure that we can hit certain paces. And if we're quite fatigued from the residual fatigue coming from strength training, that might affect our adaptations for that really key session. So my recommendation for this kind of scenario is that if we're really trying to improve our endurance training and we have key endurance sessions which we know we need to be very fresh for and which generate quite a lot of fatigue, maybe we should start thinking about putting them first during that day. Reason number two, logistical reasons. Let's be honest, a lot of hybrid athletes are training around other commitments. That might be work, that might be family commitments, but sometimes we need to try and squeeze in training whenever we can. So a good example of this is someone that might cycle 20 kilometers to their gym. That would mean that their endurance training would happen before their strength training. Is this a bad thing? Probably not. If you start cycling to the gym at a leisurely pace, that's a really good opportunity to try and get some good low intensity endurance training, or popular zone 2 at the moment type of training. Is this going to affect your strength training? It's probably not at an intensity that's going to really negatively affect your strength training. It's not going to really shut off some molecular pathways which is going to change how we react to the strength training. In all honesty, we see it's a kind of constraint that we have to organise training in this way because we're doing it around other commitments, but it could be a really good opportunity to just try and get as much training in as possible. So all of a sudden, something that's seen as a real negative, doing endurance before strength training, actually is now seen as a positive. Reason number three, athlete preference. Think about your own training and when you prefer to do a type of training at a certain time of day. Some people prefer to do their endurance training in the morning, while others prefer to do their weight training in the morning. And we need to take this into account because if we start programming weight training in the morning for someone that just hates doing weight training in the morning, they're not going to be consistent with it, they're not going to be training with intent, and that's going to lead to poorer improvements over time. So sometimes we need to think about what the athlete prefers because that often leads to them enjoying their training more, training with more intent, and that's what's going to lead them to progress nicely in hybrid training, rather than being really rigid and following the science exactly. So what are your thoughts of doing endurance training before strength training? Let me know in the comments and please give me a like and subscribe.